Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
It is Friday, and it's Three Martinis Lunch. Greg Columbus. Back on Monday, you're stuck with me again, Chad Benson. As always, though, Jim Garrity is here, and we got you good. We have got your bad, and it is bad. And we've got the crazy as well. That was kind of a big thing I talked about today. Let's start with the good. Trump is going to Minnesota, Jim. How about those apples?
Yeah, and I don't know whether you want to characterize this as a good martini or more of a surprising martini. Trump not needing to be in court today goes up to Minnesota, and by normal standards, most people say, Minnesota, no Republicans won that since 1972. It's a deep blue state. Why on earth would Trump be going there? Well, he came within like 1 or 2 percentage points against Hillary Clinton back in 2016. Didn't do as well in the matchup against Joe Biden. But I think there's something kind of intriguing here that, as listeners know, Joe Biden's job approval rating isn't particularly high anywhere. And so I started looking over, I checked both Real Clear Politics and 538 to say, all right, these guys are good aggregators. They look at all the different polls. You can take a look at it. Well, the most recent poll in the state of Minnesota in Survey USA has Biden at 44%. And Trump at 42%, a 2 percentage point lead for Biden, well within the margin of error. There's a McLaughlin Associates. Now, that's a Republican pollster, but they had Trump actually ahead in the state. If you don't want to believe it, fine. That's all right. The Survey USA, the previous poll, which was conducted in early April, also had Biden up by 2 points. Again, 44% to 42%. No real change in the course of a month or so. If you're looking for a good poll for Biden in the state of Minnesota, you got to go to a Florida Atlantic University poll conducted at the end of February, beginning of March. That one had Biden up 8, and that's probably closer to it. But even you go before then, again, Survey USA had Biden up by 4. In January, they had Biden up by 3. Public Polling Project, which I admit I'm not terribly familiar with, had them even. This is back in November. But you just kind of look at that, you're like, for a blue state, Minnesota isn't looking that blue this cycle. So again, considering the tone of overconfidence that the Biden campaign and Biden administration has brought to so many issues, we really shouldn't be shocked by this. But I think it's safe to say, I don't know if I want to say Minnesota is a swing state this year. I don't know if any of these numbers are enough to make me say, oh, it's a toss-up or anything like that. Look, it's still a blue state. But right now it's a fairly close blue state, and Trump probably seems to be within the margin of error. And so look, when it comes to top priority states, the Trump campaign is going to put more effort into Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, all the Sun Belt states, which are looking a little better. And then you got the big three in the Great Lakes area, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Pardon me.
Wisconsin.
I nearly had a Rick Perry moment there. Couldn't remember the third one. But Minnesota probably belongs in that mix of that discussion of the next tier of states. I look at this like, these, first of all, Biden's lead in Minnesota is smaller than Trump's lead in Nevada in almost all these polls. And it's a similar story in North Carolina that I keep insisting doesn't really strike me as a swing state. So you add it up. I think the map is looking a little more friendly to Trump and a little less friendly to Biden. There are probably listeners out there who are like, I'm not a huge fan of Trump, but I do think the weakness of Biden is a major headache for Democrats up and down the ballot this November.
When you're looking at the polls, and I think, and this is a state that I think is very interesting in a sense that those polls, is that a head-to-head? Because what happens when you add in RFK Jr. in some of these places? Because especially a place like Minnesota, which screams, Jesse Ventura, RFK Jr. kind of stuff.
Yeah, the Survey USA poll, somewhat to my frustration, really didn't give the other ones as options. And I'm a little frustrated by the fact that because I really would be curious about, if RFK is in there, if Jill Stein is in there, if Cornel West is on the ballot. Now, I should point out, one of the reasons Trump is doing better in these 5 candidate polls is that I would argue at least 2 of them, if not 3 of them, arc figures on the left. I guess you could argue about how you want to characterize RFK Jr., but look, he's a Kennedy, right? There's still a, up until very recently in his career, most people would say, yes, he's a very progressive Democrat. We don't know who the Libertarian candidate's going to be, and you could conceive of a scenario where the Libertarian candidate pulls away some Trump votes, but honestly, I don't think it's going to be. I think it'll be very much on the margins. So the addition of these other candidates, it's very easy to envision a scenario where they play a Ralph Nader style role or a Jill Stein style role in 2016, where they're getting 1 or 2%, but that's 1 or 2% that the Democratic candidate could not afford to lose in some of these swing states.
That's Jim Garrity. I'm Chad Benson in for Greg Corombos on this 3 Martini lunch. This could have been the bad, the crazy. It could be all of those things. The cat fight between MTG, Crockett, and AOC. I am so over the high school reality television, look at me politics. And that's what it is. I was telling people today, these people are a brand. They're a political brand. They're celebrities is what I call them. They're more interested in the 10 million followers they have on all of their social media than the 50,000 people they represent.
Yeah, for those who don't know the backstory, so the hearing is on Attorney General Merrick Garland refusing to release the audio recordings of President Joe Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur. During the hearing, Marjorie Taylor Greene asked Democrats whether any of them were employing Lauren Merchan, who's the daughter of Judge Juan Merchan, who's overseeing Trump's trial up in Manhattan. For what it's worth, I would much rather have a judge that had not worked in Democratic politics. And my understanding is that Lauren Merchan had worked for Kamala Harris back in the past. And that just strikes me as that doesn't look good. I don't know if obviously it's not enough to take Judge Merchan off the trial, but I still think it looks bad. Anyway, Greene asked Democrats if any of them are employing her, and one of the Democrats, Jasmine Crockett of Texas, asked, what we're here for? I don't think you know what you're here for. I think your false eyelashes are messing up what you're reading. That's Greene to Crockett. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez jumps in and, how dare you attack the physical appearance of another person? Greene asks Ocasio-Cortez, are your feelings hurt? AOC replies, oh, girl, baby girl. And it just goes downhill from there. And it is so there are 2 reasons, besides the obvious absurdity, besides the obvious juvenile name calling and just, utter, just a ridiculous lack of decorum for what's supposed to be an official hearing and government proceeding. Chad, in addition to everything else, I'm supposed to do an appearance on NBC News later today. And we're going to talk about more than one topic, thankfully. But as soon as I saw this, I'm like, they're going to want to talk about this. They're going to want to talk about MTG. And one of the questions is going to be some version of, Jim, why does Marjorie Taylor Greene keep doing this? And I'm going to be very tempted to answer, she keeps doing it because then we do segments about it. Every time she does something outrageous, we talk about it. We give her more attention. We give her and this probably is really good for her fundraising. So if we really wanted her to stop doing it, we would stop paying attention to it, and we would not, I don't want to be obnoxious to my hosts or anything. Look, it's news, and we're talking about it on this program. I guess I'm part of the problem too. But it just seems utterly absurd behavior, and yet this works for MTG, and this works for AOC too. This is, for certain, the members of Congress who are best known for being fighters, certainly not getting legislation passed. This is all part of, as you said, all part of their brand. And Chad,
they're about being firebrands. They're not about doing anything other than that. And I said that today on my show, Jim. I said, look, the reality is she's going to keep doing it until people stop covering it. And, but nobody wants to be the people that ignore it.
Yeah.
So you're going to get the same thing over and over again.
People are talking about it, and so if you and I hadn't talked about it on the podcast, people would say, "Oh, why are Jim and Chad not paying attention to this? They're embarrassed by MTG, and they're hoping that if they don't talk about it, no one will notice." And similarly, I'm sure that's the same attitude of the NBC producers who said, "Hey, we want to, have a segment about this." And if you ignore it, you feel like you're ignoring the news. If you pay attention to it, you're giving them what they want. And it just feels like this endless cycle that there's no way to break it because And here's the thing: if you are a member of Congress and you issue a detailed white paper laying out a policy proposal to address a major, there's no way that becomes big news. You'll be lucky if your local paper writes a 3-inch story about it. But this will get major headlines, and this will get a lot of coverage on cable TV.
And that's why we have a problem in our politics. It has become reality TV. We moved from the good, the bad, to the crazy, and it was crazy. And I covered this actually more than just about anything else today because I found it fascinating. Arguably the best golfer in the world. There's no argument about that. The most boring golfer in the world in many cases. There's no argument about that. A man whose most exciting thing is staying up till 11, having some ice cream after a Bible, session. Scottie Scheffler was arrested today and even booked in for felony assault on a police officer wearing the orange jumpsuit, man.
Yeah, it is a famous mugshot right up there with, you could say Donald
Tiger
Trump.
Woods.
Okay, yeah. So people have said, we can argue who the greatest golfer of all time is, but people have really liked Scheffler's mugshot better than Tiger's. So not really a political topic, although I could see this spurring some discussions of the police and how they treat those who are accused of crime. Because as we understand it, look, there is a fatal traffic accident not far from the Valhalla Golf Club in Louisville, which is where the PGA Championship's being held. Traffic gets stopped because they're dealing with the aftermath of that traffic incident. Scheffler is trying to get to not related to this accident, but he's trying to get to the golf course on time. And as he understands, as according to his statement, he misunderstood the direction from the police officer that was directing traffic. He put out a statement saying, quote, "This morning I was preceded as directed by police officers. It was a very chaotic situation, understandably so, considering the tragic accident that occurred earlier, and there was a big misunderstanding of what I thought I was being asked to do. I never intended to disregard any of the instructions. I'm hopeful to put this to the side and focus on golf today. Of course, all of us involved in the tournament express our deepest sympathies to the family of the man who passed away in the earlier accident this morning. It truly puts everything in perspective." Now, ESPN had one of its reporters, Jeff Darlington, at this incident. Scheffler is trying to drive around the crash scene on a median. A police officer instructed Scheffler to stop, but I guess he continued to drive 10 to 20 yards towards the entrance. The police officer, according to the ESPN report, quote, "At one point, an officer attached himself to the side of Scheffler's car. Scheffler stopped his car as he turned into the entrance of Valhalla Golf Club. After about 20 to 30 seconds, Scheffler rolled down his window to talk to the officer. The officer grabbed Scheffler's arm to pull him out of the vehicle, according to Darlington. The officer reached inside the vehicle to open the door, and once Scheffler was pulled out, he was pushed against the car and placed in handcuffs." Now, the really best part is that apparently after the cop goes to the ESPN reporter and says, "Do you know who that was?" And the ESPN reporter says, "Yes, that's the guy who's currently rated number 1 and considered to be a good chance to be the winner of this PGA Championship." This really seems like a minor misunderstanding that did not require, did not necessarily require felony charges. And I think that's kind of an embarrassing incident for the police. There's video, there's a little sign of him violently resisting and stuff like that. But so Chad, when you were talking about today, what was your takeaway from all this?
My takeaway was, by the sounds of it, I think he thought that this was a normal situation. Because if you've ever been to any of these tournaments, I've been to a lot of them. There are police everywhere. There's all kinds of stuff everywhere. Things are blocked off. I think he thought, oh, this is for the regular people. Mm-hmm. This isn't for the golfers. And then it was a misunderstanding, and that's what it was. To rise to the level of a felony is insane. And the fact, too, that he looked over at Jeff Darlington and he said, "Will you help me?" And which is, again, bizarre. But here's the other thing. He's on the course right now as we're recording this right now. And he's currently 1 under, and he's in the top 10.
Yeah, by the time people hear this podcast, we'll probably know how he did. Somebody was saying this is going to be the biggest flex since Michael Jordan's so-called flu game. I think in that Last Dance documentary, it sounded more like food poisoning or something. But just the idea of if he went out and shot his worst round ever, everyone would totally understand because he spent, a chunk of the morning in lockup in orange jumpsuit and all that stuff. People joking he should, be golfing in the orange jumpsuit and all that stuff. I think everybody's rooting for him. I think everybody understands that he didn't really do anything that was not an understandable mistake. You want to give him a citation or something? Okay, fine. Nobody's saying he's a saint, but it really does seem like an innocent misunderstanding. And the idea of being dragged down to the police station and having your mugshot taken seems like an overkill. And again, we're not really a big fan of do you know who I am type behavior, but it does seem a little weird to watch the guy who's the number one golfer in the world getting arrested on his way to a golf tournament over what seems like a very minor
and not invoking the "Do you know who I am?"
Yeah.
All he said was, "I'm a player in this tournament."
Yeah.
That's it.
That's a fact.
And it's just the whole thing is bizarre because the fact that you went over then and go, "Hey, who is this guy?" And they're like, "Oh, he's the best golfer in the world. He's the guy that's favored to win this thing." And they didn't go, "Okay, maybe we've gone too far." And maybe this was a bit much. Maybe we should just cite him or whatever. But instead it was the full thing. And they took his handcuffs off and they said they put him back on. And he said, "Look, I didn't understand what you were saying. I didn't quite get what you were saying. I would, it just seemed like it went too far." It's been quite a while. It's quite a week or so because he just had his first child born the other day as well.
Yeah. It all happens at once. By the way, so failure to obey a lawful order is indeed a crime in many jurisdictions. If a policeman tells you step away from there, it's a crime scene. You have to obey that, or there could be legal consequences for not obeying that. Failure to understand a lawful order, I feel like, should be a grayer area, and that it's very hard to believe there was any criminal intent to ignore the law or something like that. So I think there's enormous sympathy for this guy. I think the Louisville Police Department's going to probably he's got himself a black eye, and it's embarrassed itself. We'll see how things shake out from here. I assume the charges will be dropped or greatly minimized.
I assume that as well.
But also, one other observation, and I say this as I'm not really a huge golf fan. My dad is more into it, but I'm just going to observe, if this had happened to Tiger, when Tiger Woods was the number one golfer in the world, everybody knew who Tiger Woods was, right? They recognized him from the coverage, they recognized him from Nike commercials. It says something that Scheffler is not instantly recognizable the way that Woods is.
No, he's not. And the joke is he's going to add some street cred to who he is. Because, like they talk about, his Bible studies are the most exciting things he does outside of hanging out with his wife. So maybe this gives, that's one of the things they talk about golf. All the bad guys have gone over to live, and the boring is stuck over in the PGA Tour. Maybe Scottie made it a little less boring.
He is,
but
now
it'll be interesting to see how this.
Yeah, we close out the week on the observation of the notorious outlaw, Scottie Scheffler.
That's right.
Chad,
that is fun, man. I love being here this week.
Yes,
it's great. Thanks so much for having me. And you guys can follow me at Chad Benson Show. And of course, everybody knows where you are.
Yep. National Review, Washington Post, and on Twitter. X at Jim Garrity.
Yeah, very much X. You guys have a good one. And thanks a lot again, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad.